All right, everyone. Well, we did get kind of an October surprise, 24 hours before Halloween. Joe Biden came out the other day and thought that it was wise to call all of Donald Trump's supporters garbage. He was referring to the Puerto Rico statement that was made at Madison Square the other day, when the comedian said, well, Puerto Rico is just a floating pile of garbage. Biden weighs in and says, well, the only floating garbage I see out there are his supporters, referring to Trump, of course. That's not a good look. To be clear, strategically, especially a week before the election, it's not a good idea to castigate 80 plus million people as being garbage. And this is another in a long litany of events with Joe Biden, where honestly, there's got to be some part of me that believes there's an outside chance he's doing it on purpose. Even CNN, they're doing a lot of gaslighting and wagon circling and butt covering right now. But even they're like, oh, this could create a problem for Kamala Harris. Well, no shit, Sherlock. Yes, I'm sure that the average independent voter who may tilt in that direction, is they're like, they want unity and stuff like that. They're like, we got to calm down. This is not unity. This is not attempting to calm down the increasingly politicized situation in the United States. I'd point out that the same commentators that said that Trump not saying something with regards to Puerto Rico is a comedian, an entirely different person who was immediately disavowed, calling an island garbage, referring specifically to its government and its civic structure, of course, in that context, is a little bit different from coming out and openly stating that tens of millions of people are quite literally garbage. Well, I'm proud garbage. I'll be voting for Donald Trump, and I think that everyone knows that. I don't care what Joe Biden's opinion is. I don't care about Kamala thinking I'm a Nazi. I don't care about, often very well-paid DNC shills online calling me names. I've been through this before. I've been making content since the late 2000s. I've heard it all. Supposedly, I'm much worse than just a Nazi. Like, I was a Nazi before Donald Trump even ran, according to these people. So I wear that as a badge of pride that some of the weirdos of society that get hyperbolic a lot have a problem with me. Again, though, there's got to be some part of me that thinks that maybe Joe Biden's doing this on purpose. That maybe he's bitter about the fact that his party forced him out. He's looking at her campaign and saying, well, there's only an outside chance she's going to win. And he's like, well, they should have just stuck with me. And by the way, I have to agree with Joe Biden on that. I said that for months. It would be asinine for them to force him out because there's only one person they can actually get in there. By the time of the debate, several of the states had effectively locked in the ticket. There was only one other person that they could run. Otherwise, they'd be jettisoning several of the swing states. They would be fundamentally incapable of winning. It would be impossible to vote for the ticket because it wouldn't be an accepted ticket under those state laws. I think Georgia and Wisconsin specifically, I think, were the two big ones. And I think Nevada was the third. I think there was a third in there somewhere. And that's number one. Number two, the strenuous amount of gaslighting that I'm seeing. Legacy media, liberal influencers, so-called Tim Walz actually coming out, trying to do damage control and say, well, don't actually watch the clip. Link in the description. You can literally see it for yourself in context. Joe Biden was explicitly, clearly, objectively referring only and solely to Trump's voters. He was not referring to Trump. He was not referring to an element of Trump voters. In the context, there is no way to construe what he said except to construe it as he's talking specifically about every Trump voter, every single one of them, as being garbage. Nonetheless, legacy media is quietly trying to fix the transcripts and make it look like he was referring to only a small subset, the ultra-MAGA types, or referring to specifically Trump and his policies. Well, of course, if you're bashing, your protege's opponent as being extreme or something, that's just politics. That's perfectly fine. You can say Trump is a fascist, Trump is a Nazi. It doesn't really do anything. It's no longer working. It's like, the boy who cried wolf at this point. But you can do that, and Trump can come out and say things about Kamala or people that work with her directly in the political sense. But if you come out and you castigate an entire voting base, again, arguably 80 million plus people, as being garbage, that doesn't go over very well. And it reminds me of Hillary Clinton with her deplorable and irredeemable comments back in 2016. Now, this isn't the candidate that's saying it, but it is the candidate's boss the former presumptive nominee of the Democratic Party, under which Kamala Harris serves, and she has said several times now, when asked, there's not a damn thing that she would have changed from the Biden administration's days in office. She's very unrepentant about that. She's stated that on 2 different occasions, also stating, of course, she thinks she's done a great job as border czar and will continue to do exactly the same job for the next 4 years if elected. Again, that's not necessarily something that I think the average American wants to hear. I think they would like to hear a little bit of repentance and say, well, there are things we could have been doing differently, and yeah, it was border czar, and then explain, you know, I'm not literally in charge of the border, it's about international movement of people and talking to these other countries. Okay, that would have been better. That would have been a little bit better. Still sounds like ass covering, but a little bit less ass covering. At least you're trying to cover your ass instead of like holding it open and pooping everywhere. It's basically what Kamala did. Now, I'm not going to be gaslit. I can see the clip for myself in context. Specifically when asked with regards to the garbage comments, he says, I'm seeing garbage out there and it's his voters. It's Trump voters. You couldn't get more explicit. There's no interpretation there to be made. There's no nuance in it. It's a very simplistic, short couple of sentences that have to do specifically with a voting block. That the legacy media, look at MSNBC or what Tim Walz said, some of these other morons, they would have you believe, no, that's not actually what was said. Biden was targeting Donald Trump himself. No, he wasn't. He doesn't talk about Trump explicitly. He's talking about his voters. He's talking about people that voted for or are planning to vote for Donald J. Trump. That's the only interpretation that can be made. It's a huge mess, which is why that's all I'm seeing right now, cross-platform, exploding across the Twitter sphere. A million videos probably already up about it, including this one in a few minutes, and lots of coverage from legacy media left, right, and center. And like the right-wing media is having a field day. Like Fox is gleeful about this, saying, oh, well, it's just like deplorables and stuff. I happen to agree with that summation, basically. The left-wing media can't defend the actual explicit content of the commentary that was made. There is no defense for it. And so they're pretending that it didn't happen. That's not what he meant. Yes, it is what he meant. And they were trying to blame his goddamn stutter at one point. I shit you not. They're literally trying to say, well, Joe has a stutter. That's not what he meant. Stuttering does not cause you to speak in such a manner. And he does not have a goddamn stutter. I can pull up decades and decades of Joe Biden speaking. And occasionally he mumbles or he goes off track, but he does not have a stutter. It does not exist. Show me one instance of him in the Senate in the 70s, 80s, or 90s exhibiting any symptoms of a stutter. It does not exist. Actually, was very well spoken as a senator. There was a time when Joe Biden would have been upper crust with regards to his skill as a rhetorician, actually. Believe it or not, most people, younger people, they remember Joe as vice president and president. So, yeah, the gaffe master, basically. The court jester for Barack Obama, and then, of course, the senile, demented man who was president and shouldn't be now because apparently he's not well enough to run, but he's well enough to run the country. I find that mysterious. Again, I happen to agree with generally the right-wing summation of that scenario. Now, Biden did explicitly call tens of millions of people garbage. It's sort of like the garbage people thing back during like the Gamergate era. It's like deplorables. It's like irredeemables. We've seen this from politicians in this cycle, including Hillary, Pelosi, and others, calling people fascists, Nazis, all of these other things. You're dangerous. You're weird. And stupid shit like that. We need to turn the page. This is a campaign of joy. Yes, Kamala takes great joy in looking at war footage. She's just like Liz Cheney's dad. I'm sure that they all get along at their box wine parties. So, no, gaslighting aside, it's very explicit what was said. We all understand what was intoned by this because you don't need any interpretation. It's an explicit, objective statement that's being made. There's no meandering. There's no interpretation. There's no nuance. It's just his opinion about Trump voters. That's about all. Peace out.